Welcome into another edition of the Five Reasons Podcast. My name is Chris Whittingham, joined as always by Ethan Skolnick. We are, of course, part of the Five Reasons Sports Network, which covers all of South Florida sports. We have Miami Heat beat now into off-season mode. They'll be tracking the NBA lottery, the NBA draft now that the Heat have a lottery pick entering this year, and, of course, debriefing from the season and having plenty of fun as well, talking about the full breadth of the NBA. 3 yards per carry going strong during the NFL draft season. It is kind of funny, Ethan, that over the weekend there was the coin toss for the NBA lottery, and it has now been revealed that the Florida Panthers, Miami Dolphins, and Miami Heat are all picking at 13. And maybe this could be an idea for our website, fivereasonsports.com. The symmetry of a team picking 13th is kind of the worst place you want to be, and all of our teams are there. But I kind of discovered that with the Panthers over the weekend.
Yeah, except the Marlins. They're not going to be there.
Right, they're going to be picking number 1.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. If they're just going to keep throwing Wei and Chen out there every day just to make sure. He's gonna pitch in 120 games this season just to make sure that they lose them. Like they were, unfortunately for them, on their way to potentially winning a series against the vaunted Philadelphia Phillies, taking them to 13 innings today in a 1-1 game, and then they threw Chen in, and you knew they were going to lose, and he gave up three home runs there, a couple of home runs, a home run, triple home run, I guess it was.
Yeah.
So yeah, it ain't great, but yeah, no, that's where we are as a South Florida sports market. It's a great time to start a sports network. Can't get any worse. And we will have coverage. I mean, I feel like, Chris, that's all we're going to do is just host draft parties. Just draft parties.
We were thinking about hosting an NBA draft lottery party. We figure it couldn't really go worse than, I mean, the worst thing that can happen is the Heat fall from 13 to 14 because whoever, I think Sacramento finished with the 14th best lottery odds after the coin toss. They end up with a top 4 pick and Miami moves down 1 spot. That's the worst. Why don't we have a lottery party? Because what's the worst that can happen? But yeah.
But we will be blamed for it, though. No question.
South Florida sports, we're picking 13th, but we wanted to do this episode because we were both at the Pat Riley press conference on Saturday afternoon. We thought it would be on Monday, but the Heat call us in on a Saturday, so of course we are there. And so we want to kind of talk about our biggest takeaways from that press conference. And I'll go ahead and start. And by the way, if you want to check out the full breadth of everything he had to say, check it out at fivereasonsports.com. Ethan, you aggregated all of your tweets, and you can check out everything that was said that was meaningful there. But I want to start with my biggest takeaway, and that was an answer he gave to a question to Ira Winderman. There was a bit of a spat between the two of them. There was kind of an obsession. So Riley accused Ira of being obsessed with money and contracts, and I think that's an incorrect accusation. I think it's perfectly fair to be obsessed with the Heat's cap sheet at the moment. But he said, I'm going to now say something to you that perhaps you haven't heard before. When we were negotiating with Gordon Hayward, we told James Johnson and Dion Waiters that if, and I'm paraphrasing, this isn't a direct quote, but it is very much what he said. He said that if we get Gordon Hayward, Dion Waiters, and James Johnson, you will get 2 years of a contract. But if we don't get Gordon Hayward, and this is on July 1, he says to James Johnson and Dion Waiters on July 1, because he didn't want to lose them to other teams, and he said that he knew other teams were providing offers. He said that on the first day of free agency, 4-year deals, James Johnson, Dion Waiters locked in, and my mouth was hanging open at the admission, and his rationale was we wanted to keep that 30-11 team together. And unfortunately, we ran out of time to ask questions because that would have been my follow-up is, so you guys really believed in 30-11, didn't you? And I think that's kind of my biggest takeaway is that, first off, Gordon Hayward not choosing to come to Miami set off a series of rather unfortunate events, but also the organization believed in it, and they decided they were going to come back with James Johnson and Dion Waiters no matter what. And I'm just shocked by that.
Well, I think there was frustration there, right? And so, look, I've dug into this a little bit more over the past 24 hours since Pat's press conference. I have some clarification on some things. Doesn't necessarily mean that I support the organization's spin on certain things. Some things I do understand a little bit better, and I'll try to speak to that during the course of the pod. But I think what happened is that 30-11 became the backstop, essentially. It was, okay, we're going to do what we do. which is go after the big fish. And that's what we appreciate the Heat for, right? They go for it. They get in the room. And again, that's my problem with them now, is that they can't get in the room this summer, but that they've typically been able to get in the room somehow, some way. LaMarcus Aldridge, there was no chance he was coming to Miami, right? On a 1-year mid-level exception deal. Like, why was he going to do that? But Pat got a meeting with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and he almost pulled it off.
There was no reason that Durant ever should have, considered the Miami Heat. When he's looking at, either staying in Oklahoma City with a team that was basically one game, for potentially going to the finals, or going to play with Curry, okay, and Draymond and Clay, and winning a guaranteed championship. There was no reason he should have considered Miami, but he did. There was no reason that Gordon Hayward really should have looked seriously at Miami. Look, he's not a Miami guy. Okay, his college coach was in Boston, but this is what the Heat typically is able to do. They're able to get in the room, and that's much to their credit. And I think when they struck out on some of these, it was, okay, the fallback option is we'll bring back a team that had some success in the second half of the year. I think what they miscalculated, a few different things, and the money does play into this. And look, I have some fun with Ira, but I thought Pat was a little unfair to Ira in that press conference. I mean, particularly then praising Sarah Sanders and calling him Jim Costa. I thought that was all a bit much. But look, the way that I look at it, Chris, is they viewed 30-11 from the prism of, we have players who are playing hard for us. This came together as a team. Now, it came together as a team, as I think some of them even acknowledged, in part because of the low expectations. They were a terrible team in the first half of the season, terrible. And so there wasn't really a lot of pressure on them, and then they just sort of caught lightning in a bottle. And I think that they hyped that too much, believed in it too much. I think in retrospect, they see it differently now, but I don't think they did at the time. And their thing was, if we can't get Hayward, if we can't get that lead piece, let's bring back something that was reasonably successful. Now, with that being said, I'm not going to support the 4-year deals. I never have. I know Pat said there was another deal out. He said that there was another deal out there for him. I don't know what that was. Was it Utah? Because I know that the Jazz had some interest, but how did he know on, say, July 1st that there was a deal of that length? Dion, I've never heard that there was a deal of that length. Look, they can talk now about how, we didn't expect JJ to get hurt and playing with a sports hernia. We didn't expect Dion to sort of get himself out of shape. I thought, to me, and we'll get to it, to me the most interesting thing in the press conference was Pat following up on Spo, calling out Dion Waiters publicly again, okay, which, again, is sort of the position the organization's in now, which they don't do a lot of that, particularly Spo never does it. Pat does do it at times, but to be in that spot that they have to sort of try to reach Dion through the press at this point to get him into the kind of shape that they feel he needs to be in to be successful. But I think they overestimated it. When I've talked to people inside the organization, one of the things I've gotten, Chris, is that they didn't really know that they could be in the room in 2020 anyway. Because basically, if you go back to the beginning of this, they put together a team when they made the trade for Goran Dragic. And on that same day, Chris Bosh, was in the hospital, okay, later that day. But when they made the trade for Goran Dragic and then they decided to max Hassan, they basically, the way that they viewed it was they were on a different track at that point anyway. That even though they weren't keeping Dwayne long-term, that they were on a track where basically they were not going to have a lot of cap flexibility in 2020 regardless. And so I think that played into some of the decisions that they made. But you know how I feel about the James Johnson deal. You know how I feel about, how good this organization is at developing Derek Jones Jr.'s. I thought it was interesting, Chris. 2 of the 6 players that both Spo and Riley praised, okay, was the 4 young guys that they've already kind of developed, right?
Yeah.
Derek Jones Jr. added to the 3 kids they drafted. And then it was Yonte Maton and Duncan Robinson. Like, they feel they're going to do it again, Chris. Like, they feel like they've got 2 more guys that are going to be their next Magruder, next Anthony
They're
Carter,
good at
next
this
Malik
now.
Allen,
They're
next
good
Mike
at this
James.
now.
And that's my frustration with the 4-year contract for James Johnson.
No, and that's totally valid, and it's what they're good at now. They develop players, and we've talked about this before, but I mean, I'm watching the playoffs, and Montrezl Harrell is having a huge impact for the Clippers. He's on 2 years, $12 million. So I mean, I understand what they're saying, which is really, I mean, we talk about a bad summer of 2017, but it really is the moves in 2015-16 that set them on their current track. As you mentioned, trading for Goran Dragic, or was that 2014-15? But either way, that 2-year period, you trade for Goran Dragic, and you have to, after giving up 2 unprotected first-round picks, then sign him to a long-term deal. So you're spending a lot of money there. You're spending a lot of money on Hassan Whiteside. You're spending a lot of money on Tyler Johnson, although we can certainly question the merits of that move. But really, I'm not concerned about having cap space in 2020. I'm concerned about having cap space in 2019. And I think that they could have a route, right? They could have a route to cap space this summer if they didn't do Johnson, Olynyk, and Waiters, and they decided to keep going. And I think I'm surprised that Pat Riley basically acknowledged that he was weary of the room, that maybe the organization was weary of bringing a whole new group of players in. We just went 11-30, and we're not going to do that again. We're not going to start from scratch and bring in this whole new cast of role players to try and go again. We're not going to try and be in the free agent rooms again. He said we wanted to embark on a 2 or 3 year plan, and that 2 or 3 year plan has kind of become a 4-year plan with these long-term deals they signed these guys to, and maybe they thought we can ultimately have the out of trading them, but he's been wrong. He's been wrong because, and as much as he said he had to go at Barry Jackson as well because Barry used the word obstacles to describe their route to their next superstar, he said, well, I don't view it as obstacles. Well, clearly they are because they haven't done anything in a year. They haven't done anything in a year other than get off of luxury tax. And so they are obstacles. But for me, looking at this summer, and again, it's so frustrating watching Kawhi Leonard play well in the postseason. Kevin Durant's going to be available. Obviously, maybe it looked like he was going to be on his way to New York, but maybe he saw Miami as that opportunity if it was available. Jimmy Butler is a free agent. And by the way, I really liked his performance for Philly on Saturday. I don't know why he's all of a sudden being written off as a top quality player, not to lead you to a championship, but a piece, right? There are all these free agents out there this summer. And if we're saying that James Johnson and Deion Waiters would have taken 2-year deals if Gordon Hayward had signed here, then, those are the 2-year deals that you should be signing, whether it's with them or with other players. For Miami and Pat Riley, after giving up first-round picks to Goran Dragic, after giving up a lot of cap space, after not really having tradable players or picks, their next route is free agency. It's always free agency for them. And so the fact that they've taken themselves out of it, again, we've talked about it a million times, but basically to seek some stability, to seek some comfort in the aftermath of trying and failing. I almost wonder if it's bruised egos in that organization for failing on the big free agent. And I don't think anyone was particularly blaming Miami for not getting Gordon Hayward or Durant, as you said, given the situations that they ended up going to. But I almost wonder if it's bruised egos and we're going to settle down for a little bit and maybe not try and play this high-risk game of going in free agency. And as we've said a million times, I think they erred.
We'll get back to our episode here in a second, but first I want to tell you about a great new sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is ShipYourCarNow.com. These guys can move any car, boat, RV, motorcycle, or equipment anywhere you need worldwide. You have a business and need to ship freight or machinery? Call them. College moves, new car, used car, buying the toy you've looked at for a while? Call them. These guys can ship it all, so give them a call. Here's the number, 1-800-264-4644. That's 1-800-264-4644, or visit shipyourcarnow.com/5 reasons. Also, make sure to mention 5 reasons on the phone. I wish they'd had this when I was going to college. This would have been great for me. I needed to get my car down from Baltimore to Florida. I ended up taking the auto train. You don't want to take the auto train. Ship your car, fly. No job too big or too small. Ship Your Car Now moves it all. Before I get into a lot of the specifics here, we're going to go again through some of the tweets that I put out, like 40 tweets that day, and so I'm going through it as we're speaking. Just a general sort of big picture thought on Riley's press conference. It was confusing to me because there were times where he was really definitive and there were times that he was really unclear. There were times that he took all the responsibility and there were other times that there were some excuses and then he kept saying this is not an excuse. I mean, that happened like 5 or 6 different times.
It was out of the Eric Spoelstra playbook of please don't fire me. I'm not going to criticize the refs, but let me criticize the refs.
Let me criticize the refs. Right. Right. It was I would say this. It was kind of an odd performance. I do want to get this out of the way. The only question that I asked was about the swirl about Pat going to Los Angeles and did get Pat to say, about staying in Miami the rest of his career. Absolutely. So at least that's definitive at this point. I wanted to, not that I want to Saban him, but I did want to get him on the record with that. And now he's on the record. And my big picture takeaway on that is, he's here for the long haul. Like this is, he was not talking about a guy who is going to Malibu permanently. He was talking about a guy who's going to Malibu with 12 notebooks for the summer, but he's coming back. And not only is he coming back, but I think he's planning on coming back for multiple years here. So I don't think there's going to be a great transition in the front office anytime soon. And this comes, we're taping this as the Lakers have asked for permission to talk to Juwan Howard. So there are some pieces that may move under his feet, but he's clearly planting those feet here for a while. So that's big picture. Now, let me go through some of the specifics on this stuff. The thing about God, there's so much to delve into here. He went back to the big three, right? He had this quote I thought was interesting. He says, "We're going to figure it out. Whether you believe me or not, we're right at the launching pad right now. It took us a couple of years to pay back our student debt or loans." And then he kind of went into this riff about borrowing to get the big three with picks and money. And we know the situation. Look, the Heat have kind of been screwed by the rules like a million times. Okay. Like, I do feel like the league has legislated against them. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
it's certainly they do in the big three, or the CBA is a reaction to the big three.
Correct. I mean, sometimes on purpose and sometimes by accident. But if you go back to the sign and trades they did with the big three, remember they had to give them they gave them the 6 years, but gave them the 4th year opt out, which ended up being the reason they lost LeBron, and then had to max out Bosh, right? And not only that, but then pissed off Dwayne. So like it was bad all three ways, right? And they had to do that, and to do it as sign and trades, and to do that they had to give away 4 first-round picks. Okay, so that was legislated against them. The Tyler Johnson contract was just bad luck in the sense that rule has been changed since. Like the contract the Nets signed the Tyler to, which the Heat ended up matching, where the cap space is counted differently for the Nets than it was for the Heat. Like that's been changed, okay, in reaction. I mean, the Heat raised a stink about that, and it's been changed, but it was too late for them. So there have been some things that have broken against them. Bosh broke against them big time, right? I mean, we talk about it. They never got a chance to see that team, right? Like we never saw it because Goran came in and Bosh went out. And then they sort of tried it at the beginning of the next year, and it wasn't really perfect, but they never had a chance to sort it out, and Bosh got sick and went out again.
It was funny to me that Riley, when he was giving that rant, it was like verbatim an Alf rant, an Alf from Miami Heat beat, who's given that rant 1,000 times about we could have beaten Cleveland if Goran was if Bosh was
healthy.
They
believed that. No, Chris, I covered that team. I was with that team every day. They believed that. Not only that, I don't know if it's true or not. Who knows? I mean, you know how I feel about LeBron. I always believe in LeBron unless he's being
LeBron
coached or managed by idiots. But look, that team turned it around the second half. I will say this: that team was not real good with the core starting lineup. Bosh and Whiteside did not play great together, and the Bosh Dragic pick and pop never really developed the way people expected it to. But people around that team, the players believed they could hang with Cleveland because they had some of the right pieces to affect LeBron and to affect Cleveland. Whether it would have worked, I don't know, but they were close. I mean, they got to a Game 7 against Toronto, but we never saw the thing without Bosh, but we never saw the thing in its entirety. So I understand this. So he goes through all that, but here's my kind of issue with this particular piece of it. So he talks about it took us a couple of years to pay back our student debt or loans. Okay, from a draft pick perspective, yes, but the Bosh money, like they got that money back, right? So, like, I mean, he was taken off the books.
Mm-hmm. And their picks that they owed were not from the big three, or they were owed from the Dragic trade, which they did after LeBron left.
Right. The previous ones, right. The reason, see, Pat's got a bigger argument there for why the big three era fell apart than he does for what's happened now. I think not having the draft picks played a role in the big three era falling apart, because you and I have talked about this. They didn't develop anybody, but they also didn't have assets to be able to move to go get another core piece when Dwayne began to break down. Like if they had still had, Pat would have traded them. The ones he could have. The Stepien rule wouldn't have allowed him to trade all of them. But that Pat would have moved picks to get another frontline player to play with his core three. He would have, okay? Yeah. But he didn't have any picks, and they weren't developing players because they didn't feel any of them would be up to speed. And so what did they do? Okay, we'll try Eddie Curry. We'll try Greg Oden. We'll try Tony Douglas. We'll try Roger Mason. They tried, we'll go get Ronnie Turioff and Mike Bibby, okay, off the scrap heap. The only one that worked was Chris Anderson. That's the one they were most hesitant about because they were worried about background, and they put in a ton of time on him to make sure everything was okay. But they didn't have assets to move. So I think Pat has an argument about the big three. I think the league screwed the Heat big time. I've always said that, okay? But in a lot of different ways, okay? The luxury tax, that making it as punitive as they did, okay? the way that sign and trades were changed after the fact. All of that stuff screwed the Heat. But that's as far as I'll go with it, Chris. Like, what's happening now is a result of some bad luck. Bosh, obviously. Okay, some other things that have broken wrong, okay, but also a lot of miscalculations. And I think when you talk to people inside the organization, they acknowledge that, okay? And I thought part of my issue with Pat's press conference was that it was just all over the place. Like, it's like he wanted to send a message to certain people, I think. And so it wasn't, I'm used to him being much more, I don't know, focused in what his message is. And I'm looking at my tweets. So this is one of the reasons I did it this way. Another reason is that I was lazy. But I'm looking at my tweets that I put up on 5reasonsports.com, and I have tweets like that are 2 tweets away from each other that are basically contradicting each other. Like, if you go through them, and I feel like that's what the press conference was about. So, like, okay, let's go through some of these. He says, even here, this quote, Pat Riley, there are a lot of different ways you can go in terms of rebuilding the team fast or having the patience to adding to our young players. Okay, so he's basically talking about flexibility to sort of stay with the 4 core young players they have or add to it quickly. All right. But, I think the thing that the biggest the quote that I think speaks to what you're talking about how this gets fixed. I think this is how Riley thinks this gets fixed. I want to read this quote. Does Riley feel the Heat are positioned to acquire a star who says he wants to move? And this is the conversation we've had with Windhorst, that I've had with GMs around the league, okay, and others, that I've had with agents, that players still want to come to Miami. They still view this as a really good organization. It's still South Florida. It's still no state tax. It's still a whole lot of things that players want to come to. And they can't, as Windhorst has talked about, right, on our pod. They can't, because Pat's saying they can, okay? Pat's questioning that, because his quote was, it doesn't make any difference what we have the ability to do. We can want anything, but it doesn't make any difference. It's up to the player. It's up to them to choose where they want to go. Now, Jimmy Butler chose where he wanted to go, right? He wanted to come here.
Yeah.
I have that on good authority. I had it from the beginning. Sorry, Woj. Okay, I knew this from the start. He wanted to be.
I think he told Rachel Nichols the same thing when he did that interview.
After everybody banged on me for being wrong about that. Whatever. Okay, it is what it is. Well, it's not really, because I'm bringing it up several months later, but it's not like I'm bitter.
Yeah.
All right, but whatever. Okay, he wanted to be here, but he didn't have the. It's not as simple as Pat saying it's up to the player, because Jimmy wanted to be here, but Pat still had to deal with Tibbs and a dysfunctional organization. Now, this summer, Jimmy may want to be here again. I think it's very possible that he wants to be here again, okay? I don't have that on good authority or anything, but it wouldn't surprise me based on how much he wanted to be here the last time.
Right.
So, and if Philadelphia does get bounced in the second round, which is also very possible if you look at the East, then, and Jimmy's blamed for it in any way, he's probably not the type of guy who's going to take that well. He's probably going to look to get out of there, especially if they don't max him. So if he wants to come down here, now the Heat has a little better opportunity because they don't have to make a trade for him. But what Pat is saying is, if he says he wants to be here, that can happen. Okay, now the question is, how does it happen, right? And what the Heat have kind of said, again, and having some conversations that I've had, is that we've made things happen at the last second that nobody anticipated. You go back to, there was that guard from Toronto. They traded to Toronto, Marcus Banks, to make that deal work. What was it? The Shaq deal, right? Like, then there was the 2010, maybe it wasn't Shaq, but it was one of those deals. 2010, where they dumped. Remember, Mario was the only player on the roster,
and
right?
they dumped Michael Beasley to Minnesota.
They dumped the former number 2 overall pick in the draft after 2 years, right? Like, they found a taker.
That could have been a D'Angelo Russell thing if Beasley had
if Beasley had his head on straight.
Right, exactly. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. And look, Cleveland. I mean, look what the Lakers did this summer or 2 summers ago by dumping D'Angelo Russell. Like you said, that didn't work out very well. Look at Cleveland, which somehow got everybody. Remember, David Griffin got people to take his players, right, at the last second to accommodate LeBron in 2014. So I think what the Heat are saying is, I think what Riley was trying to say to Ira, but I thought it got overly personal, honestly, and I think kind of unfair to Ira on that, is I think what he was trying to say to Ira was, look, we've made shit happen before, okay? We can make it happen again. And I think that if you were just to look at the 25-year track record of the Heat, you would say, yes, absolutely. They're really smart. They know how to make this stuff work. They always have something in their back pocket. They're, as you said, ahead of the curve, right? That's what Windhorst said, ahead of the curve, right? They'll figure out a way to make this happen. I think the problem is, and the problem that fans have, and I polled this, and I would say about 55% of people were dissatisfied with Riley's press conference. I split it into 4 categories, like, confident, confused. I can't remember the 4, but like 55% of people were just not having it, not buying it. And I think the problem is that in the last 2 to 3 years, whether it's just bad luck, whether it's miscalculations or whatever, they either have made the wrong move as it's turned out, okay, like signing Dion Waiters to a 4-year deal coming, when he needed ankle surgery and, had a propensity to get overweight, okay. They've either made the wrong move or they haven't, as you said, haven't been able to make any move at all. And I think that second part is the more frustrating part, because the first part, you're going to make mistakes, right? You're going to make mistakes. You get in the room, you may not get the player. You make a trade, the player may not work out the way you expect. He may not adjust to your quote-unquote culture. I understand all that. But I think the thing the Heat fans are having is the issue is the inactivity. And the issue with the inactivity is that the Heat, it appears, have, as I've said, tied their own hands behind their back. And I think that's the frustration. And what they've been, I've spoken to some people who've said basically, it's not as bad as you think. We can make something happen, but we just haven't seen it in a while, right? The only things we've seen is they had too many players this year, too many of the same player, not exactly the same style, but same ability. And this has been, these are not new themes, Chris. Like, we've said this forever. Okay, it made Spoelstra's job impossible. You and I disagree a little bit about how responsible he is for it, but I think it put him in a terrible spot, and I just don't think he made the best of it, but I don't know what he could have done, okay? But to me, like, that's every move they've made has been to sort of thin it out, right? Thin out the tax, thin out the cap, thin out the roster, the rotation options. And so Ellington, Tyler Johnson, not here anymore. Magruder, not here anymore. I did get some clarification about that, by the way. I think that's worth saying because we've talked about this. They were prepared to keep Ronnie through the end of the season until they lost to Minnesota and Toronto back-to-back. And then they had a decision to make by 5 o'clock. And by then, I think their odds of making the playoffs were like, well, you knew what they were, like 12% or something like that. So they, at that point, it was, okay, let's just get under. Let's save the money, but also let's not be in a repeater tax situation, which can be punitive. And again, limit flexibility, which they don't want to do. Also, they have pushed back on me about the Kelly Olynyk thing because I have said repeatedly that it looked a little strange to me that in January, when Kelly is a really important player for you and makes things work, that he averaged 16 minutes a game instead of the 20-something he could have been averaging. And, I think he should have been playing close to 30. And additionally, he had a couple of DNPs in there, both of which they lost, by the way. Now, I was told it wasn't really about that if they wanted to hold Kelly out, they would have done it for the whole season. They would not have simply kept him out for that period of time. They would have made sure that they were under. He ended up being over, but they didn't make the playoffs, so the trigger didn't hit. Anyway, but that's basically what I was told, that they essentially had too many bigs. And they had Hassan playing better than they thought he was going to play, and they wanted to get Bam minutes. And then they had to kind of figure out what to do with James Johnson, and then Derek Jones Jr. played above what they anticipated. And so they had 5 players, even with Justice not playing 4, they had 5 players basically for, 96 minutes. So that's what was described to me. So again, I like to clarify these things. The big picture point is your point. They haven't been able to do anything to make it better in a couple of years. And that's where Heat fans are.
We'll get back to today's episode in a second, but first I want to tell you about one of our new sponsors here in the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is the attorneys at Seltzer Mayberg. Find them at onecalllegal.com. That's ONE calllegal.com, or actually call 855 5000 Law LAW. They handle cases including but not limited to car accidents, slip and falls, and any personal injury matters. Additionally, if you mention 5 Reasons, they will handle your traffic ticket for $44.99 with a new 15,000 square foot office opening on I-95 in North Miami. They will handle cases all over South Florida. Call now with 24/7 service for a free consultation. OneCallLegal.com or 855-5000 Law. The attorneys at Seltzer Mayberg, a proud sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. and it was my question, that answer. It was basically, I presented to Pat Riley the idea, and he even mentioned it in his kind of opening monologue, the idea of pre-agency, right? That there are players that are now deciding where they want to go, that are unrestricted free agents even before they've hit unrestricted free agency, which is maximizing their leverage as being 18 months, 12 months, 6 months out from their expiring contracts. And we saw Anthony Davis try and get a move to Los Angeles. We saw Jimmy Butler try and get a move to Miami. But to me, and the reason why I put the question to him is, for the most part, those kinds of players are not going to decide to go and play in Detroit. They're going to decide to go and play in Los Angeles, New York, or Miami. I think Miami is third in that group of cities that players want to go to and are attractive. And so, are you going to be ready to strike if that happens? And that's where what you were talking about comes in, where, okay, so how are you going to do it? And really the way that you would, and the reason why Cleveland managed to do it, is because they were willing to part with picks. They parted with picks so they can get off salaries, and so they can make the trades that they needed to make in order to go and execute their plan to get LeBron James, Kevin Love, and get salary cap for LeBron James so that they can bring him in. And those made sense for them at the time. But if you're Miami and you can get Jimmy Butler, are you going to exhaust all of your capital, get rid of your young players and picks to get the player that doesn't really take you to that upper echelon of the Eastern Conference? No. And so that's the rock and the hard place that you're stuck between, is that you have the ability. I mean, they had the ability. If they kept adding things into their trade with Jimmy Butler, they could have gotten him. Just as if any superstar came available. Like, if they went to San Antonio and said, we'll give you everything for Kawhi Leonard, maybe they do that. I don't know if they do. But they have that opportunity at least. But the thing is that if you give up the essence of your team in order to get one of these players, what have you really achieved by acquiring them? And so that's... When we talk about the position that they're in and preserving space and preserving room for all of this, it's and having good contracts and having the flexibility, it's so that when you do have that opportunity, you can strike without basically destroying your team, which is what you'd have to do. And so that's my concern. My concern is not that that they could pull off a trade. Is that they'd have to give up everything, and what is the value in giving up everything for a superstar? So, I get having that ultimate confidence and having that confidence in that this is what we've done previously. Really, their only thing that they've really done that was a real plan was the big three, right? They cleared out their cap sheet. They were only going to have expiring contracts, so that in 2010, they could be in position to do this. And everything else, the Hardaway trade, the Alonzo Mourning trade, the Shaq trade, hell, even picking Dwayne Wade in the draft, has kind of come about from, there's an opportunity, let's try and take advantage of it. And I get that. But at the same time, they're not in a good position, even if this opportunity comes, to add a player and then build a quality team around him. And so that's the decision you have to make. It's a decision that they did make with Goran Dragic, and we see how it's worked out. Because if you don't get a player, which I don't think Goran Dragic is, that's top two best on a championship team, and you're giving up 2 first-round picks, you haven't done anything. You haven't really improved your team. So, again, my position and the way that I positioned the question was, can you strike in a way in which you feel comfortable with it? And clearly, based off the fact that they didn't get Jimmy Butler, they're not, because they could have kept adding to that trade and they would have gotten it done. But they drew a line in the sand, and also they kind of decided that it wasn't going to be enough to improve them in the long term.
Well, and I'm glad they drew the line in the sand, because I think that if you were to give up 2 of your 3 kids for Jimmy Butler, I think you were making a mistake. Because I just don't view him as that guy, particularly at that money late in his career. But Riley came out and said, look, he said every great team needs 2 transcendent superstars. And he basically said you either grow them or you steal them. Mm-hmm. Now, the Heat have only grown 1.
Yeah.
As he said. Like, I thought that was a little odd, too. And I understand the desire to pay respect to Dwayne. And I liked a lot of what Pat said, because he basically confirmed everything I've been saying on the pod for the last 3 months. Dwayne Wade was a squirrel this year. Yeah. Dwayne Wade made everybody forget about their problems, legacy, right? One last dance. It was beautiful. I'm the biggest Dwayne homer in the world, okay? And it was great. And the last 2 nights were incredible. And look, a lot of Heat fans are fine with them not making the playoffs to have those last 2 nights. Like, they're okay with it. Like, in the Golden State game, those 3, okay? The rest of this shit doesn't matter to them, right? Yeah. They got to see Dwayne be Dwayne, okay, 3 times. So last-minute shot, okay, incredible performance at home, and then closing it with a flourish in his first triple-double since 2011. Who cares about anything else? I think 75% of Heat fans feel that way, honestly. Okay, it's about Dwayne. It was about Dwayne. It was about the way he went out. So I understand Pat getting caught up in that, and I think it's great considering, the way that they drove him out, okay, in 2016, that they've been able to embrace this and it went out the right way and that Bosch came back and everything that happens. Terrific. I'm not taking anything away from it. But he was a squirrel. And now and even Pat said that. He said, now we got to evaluate. Okay, now that's over. And now we got to figure out where we are. But he also said that he's drafted one all of the time player in 25 years. He said that. Yeah. I didn't say that. He said that, right? All the time, some of the time, none of the time. Okay. So I think that also, and I don't want to keep cycling back here too much, but I think that also plays into kind of what happened with that 30-11 team. He thought he had a bunch of all the time players. Mm-hmm. He thought that the way that those guys competed in the second half of that season to fight for their reputations, okay, because that's what a lot of that was about. They started poorly. A lot of them were on the last year of their deal. Okay, I thought Tyler Johnson's quote earlier this year was a little odd because he said some guys got paid and they didn't really, they didn't have the same hunger. But a lot of those guys, I mean, he got paid in 16, right? Like he got paid before that season, right? But other guys didn't. Okay,
and Ira, who obviously we've talked about some, but I was on radio with him once and he was saying, well, hang on a second, because the players were basically giving quotes. Oh, we have to do better against these teams that we should beat. And basically, the all of the time thing is you never think that you should beat anyone because they don't have the talent to think that they should beat anyone. And that's the thing that I've said all the time is that generally when we're talking about home record in games against poor teams, it's that you have the talented player that overcomes the listless performance. But the listless performance is coming from a starting place of we think we're better than X team, when really they're in no position to think that they're better than X team. And the whole point in their success was they didn't think they were better than anyone, and so they just tried harder than everyone.
Right, and that's been my theory about the home losses to the bad teams is that there's certain arrogance that developed in this team that I don't really know where it came from, right? Because and maybe it did come from 30-11. I'm not sure, but I think Pat thought he had more all of the time players, and he didn't. Now, who's he talking about? Well, look, clearly Deion's one. I mean, because for Spoelstra, for Pat, look, Pat, as Pat even made the Hardaway comparison that I made on the pod, right? Like he used to give Tim a hard time. We talked to Tim about it, about his weight. But Tim was a multiple-time All-Star and should be in the Hall of Fame. Like, this is Deion. Like Pat would get on Tim, and he actually said, and then that's when it went into that weird Sarah Sanders riff. But like he said something to the effect of, about Hardaway. He's like, I'm not going to give Deion the same name I gave it to Tim. I can't remember what that name was. I should, okay, but it wasn't complimentary. And again, this was Tim Hardaway, okay, All-Star point guard who had battled back from a serious knee injury that completely changed the way that he played. He went from a dynamic, break player to essentially a half-court pounder with a knuckleball jumper. Completely changed his game and was still an all-star, okay? And Pat banged on him, all right? So for him to get on Deion is not a surprise, okay? For Spo to do it, I was blown away. Yep. Of anything that happened in the two press conferences, Eric Spoelstra does not do that publicly. Okay, I would say that's happened. I could count it on one hand. I could count on one finger. I can't remember that ever happening before, Chris. Mm-hmm. I cannot. Now, I'm not going to say he doesn't do some of it behind the scenes, okay? And he's taken a couple digs at Hassan publicly.
But he'll occasionally do the thing where it's he's got to improve and we've got to improve and like I understand. No, but he'll say that he has to improve that or he's got to get better. But that was like basically a hard call out of. He's got to work, right? Like that's how
I've never heard it. I've never heard it before.
Right, in those terms.
I've never heard it. Look, he's always the king of, and again, it's an effective strategy. Okay, most players appreciate it, but it's the call out collectively, praise individually. Okay, that's always been his approach. He praises individually and he calls out collectively. Okay, we need to do. I don't want to make it about one guy. He says that all the time. He made it about one guy. Like, and then came out and said said 3 times. I went back on my tape 3 times. Pat and I are on the same page about this. So that was okay. We're not messing around here anymore. All right. You got the money, get yourself in shape. And obviously, look, they need him more now, one way or the other, either as a trade chip or as a player, because they started the season with 6'2" guards and now they have 2. Okay.
Yeah.
So, right. I mean, it's him and Josh Richardson. That's it. That's all that's left. So I thought that was fascinating to me. But again, getting back to your point here, we're kind of all over the place as Pat was. But there is so much to cover here. But they clearly believe that another opportunity will arise, because it always has. And they clearly believe that once that opportunity arises, that they will be able to move pieces around to make it happen, and that they really haven't committed to which way that'll go. Does it mean that you give up their young players? I can tell you, I've talked to 4 or 5 people inside the organization, and I've just listened to Riley and Spoelstra. They love Bam Adebayo. Love him.
Yeah.
Okay? What he's going to be, I don't know. But I would be stunned if they move him. And if I was another team, that's the piece I ask for. Mm-hmm. Okay?
But I got it, like, after last year's playoffs, that Jason Tatum, who was a huge part in Boston getting to the conference finals, was kind of off the table for Boston, right? Because it was a huge part, a creative piece in them getting to the conference finals. Is Bam that kind of untouchable for you? Where, like, if Bam was the centerpiece that can get you, I don't want to say Anthony Davis, because I mean that's a lofty standard, but let's say Anthony Davis. If Bam is the difference in you getting Anthony Davis and not, I'm saying yes every time. I mean, there's just a group of players that, by virtue of what they do, nothing against Bam, but just by virtue of what they do, particularly perimeter scoring, perimeter playmaking, that are just more valuable skill sets. So, I mean, if Bam, who for me can be, Clint Capella, who can dribble, which is a lot, but I just again don't think you're ever really making him an offensive centerpiece. If you can get an offensive centerpiece type player, I think you do that while also maintaining your self-respect and your self-preservation of that asset as being excellent. He's an excellent prospect and is already delivering on some of that promise.
You're listening to the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've created a menu of intelligent and entertaining content on demand for commutes, workouts, and more. And by now, you're already familiar with the 15 different podcasts in our network. Today, we are proud to announce the premiere of our brand new website, 5reasonsports.com. On it, you'll find columns from more than a dozen of our hosts, many who are professional writers in the market. Watch original videos from shows like Miami Heat Beat and Balls Cast. Browse our full merchandise shop. And unlike other outlets in the area, there's no paywall. Everything is absolutely free. All of this from a network that's credentialed from all 5 major sports teams in South Florida. Oh yeah, did we mention that it's free? We're by Miami for Miami. We're sports on your schedule. We're Miami Sports on Demand. We're the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Go to 5reasonsports.com today.
Yes. Well, did you see Eric Spoelstra called him one of the 5 best centers in the league once he was starting? Like, look, Anthony Davis is a different breed.
I can go with that.
Like, you put it, well, I think he's looking at metrics, and the metrics were excellent. They were. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've discussed this. But Anthony Davis, I mean, okay, he's a top 10 player in the league, and I'm being conservative, okay?
Yeah, it's probably top 7.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, you do it, right?
Yeah.
You do it. You don't ask questions, you do it. But I think, look, for Jimmy Butler, if it requires them move, and I don't know why they'd have to move Bam because his contract is not, one of the issues, sure. But maybe to get off of Hassan's money, maybe to get off James Johnson's money, Deion Waiters' money, maybe a team requires you to do that, but you're getting Jimmy Butler. I wouldn't do it. I don't, because, and I subscribe to your theory on this. Like, if Jimmy Butler and Riley's theory, you need 2 transcendent players. Mm-hmm. Now, unless he knows he's getting Kyrie somehow, and I don't know how that happens, along with Butler, then where does Jimmy Butler get you? Like, that was my issue with it from the beginning of the year. I wanted it to happen because we're a young, starving sports network, and I wanted something to change on that team. But as far as a value proposition, Jimmy Butler at $45 million at age 33 with that attitude, and I know some people like the attitude because they say he's an alpha. Okay. But is that something you want? I don't know. I mean, no. I mean, I mean, Bradley Beal Bradley Beal with that contract, with his attitude,
I disagree with you. I think Beal's a player. He might be the line, and he's playing on a terrible team, but he still plays well. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
He's not a looter and a riot. Like, he's a really good player.
No, I'm saying Bradley Beal, is a different conveation for me than Jimmy Butler. I mean, he's
fair.
Younger. He's got a better attitude than Jimmy Butler does, I think.
He hasn't played for Tibbs twice.
He hasn't played for Tibbs. He has a growing skill set. I think Jimmy, to me, I'd rather, and I know I'm contradicting by the fact that now I'm so pleased that Justice is shooting 38% from three the last 2 years, but I would rather start with the 3-point shot and develop the other parts of the game, which is the direction that Beal has gone, than to do what Jimmy Butler's done, which is he has the other parts of his game, but he's never going to be a good 3-point shooter. Like, we've just seen it. He's not. He's what is he? He's 33, 34% usually on sometimes a lot lower on high volume. Like, I understand. Look, to me, if Jimmy Butler is your second or third best player and there's another alpha on the team with him, then yes. But to have him as your guy, I was never totally into that. Now, did I overestimate Josh Richardson a little bit? Maybe. I've always felt Josh's best role is third best player on a good team. They tried to make him more this year. I think they've learned from that. I don't think that's going to be the focus next season. But I don't know that dumping Bam somewhere else so that you can clear space for Jimmy Butler is the direction that you want to go. And so all of these issues, and again, I'm looking at the quote here, and when he snapped it at Barry, okay, don't use the word obstacles around me. Like, you're right. They can make things happen, but there's cost to all of it. Like there's just nothing easy. Like, it's different than like 2010, where, like you said, they planned for it for years and they were positioned for it. And so what was the cost? Okay, we're going to officially give up on Michael Beasley. Like, literally, that was the cost. It was, but we're getting LeBron James. It'll be okay. Like that was the cost. And yes, there was the risk that Michael was going to figure things out, but they knew him well enough to know kind of what he was going to be. And it's pretty much what he's been, which is a journeyman guy who can get you 20 on a given night, but isn't going to make your team better. Okay. Like, they knew that. Like, they understood it. There's a reason certain people are probably not in the organization anymore. Okay. Because of that draft pick. That is what it is. But in this case, it's like everything you do, like you said, because they've made it hard on themselves. It's like, if they're going to move somebody, it can be done, but there's going to be 50% of Heat fans that are like, ugh. And that's where we were with the Jimmy Butler thing. Like, there was no consensus on that from their fans at all. It was, do you want to give up Josh? Do you want to give up Justice? Would you give up Bam? Is throwing in Olynyk too much? Oh, they're not going to take Whiteside or Waiters. Okay, I don't want to do it. Do you give up the first-round pick? Like, all of this is cost. And the Heat, because they have natural advantages, smart front office, good coach, great history, great weather, no state tax, everything that comes with Miami. Because they have all of those things, the Heat should be at a natural advantage if they just don't get in their own way.
Okay, I want to talk about this because I brought up a point on radio last week. Because I think a lot of people are having a go at the Lakers right now for having Lakers exceptionalism, where they're basically obsessed with themselves and the idea of themselves, and they basically can't get out of their own way. And so when they have something of a crisis, in the post-Kobe era, they blow everyone out. There's a family feud over who takes over the organization. Jeannie takes over, and has the opportunity to, after firing Mitch Kupchak and getting rid of the coach, have a full blank slate and start a whole new organization. And really, the Lakers, by virtue of what they are as an organization, winning double-digit titles, should be able to get whoever they want to be their front office executive, to be their coach. They should go after Masai Ujiri or go after one of these other top front office people. So they should go out and do that, and then they basically go and hire Magic Johnson, one of their franchise's best ever player, if not the best, and Rob Pelinka, the agent of Kobe Bryant. Of all the choices that are available, and their coach is a former player. And they basically act as if the Lakers will fix it because they're the Lakers. And they got LeBron because they're the Lakers. And as much as, obviously, the Heat are not nearly the clown show and obviously are very well run, and you mentioned all those other things of having a great front office and a great coach, but at the same time, there is a little bit of an exceptionalism in the fan base and in the organization that because we're in Miami, because we're the Heat, because we've done this before, it'll get fixed. And I wonder if when Pat Riley says there are no obstacles, when he says that we're near the launching pad, there's no evidence to support those theories, right? And so why would you believe that other than I'm Pat Riley, I've done it again and again, this is the Heat, we've done it again and again, and I'm a bit concerned that the thing with the culture and the thing with, bringing back Dion and James Johnson because they bought into the culture, that there's this exceptionalism that because we're the Heat and we do things the right way that we're going to figure this out. And I think what we've talked about a lot are some bad processes in figuring out what they're going to do going forward. And so I'll just put that to you and say, do you think that the Heat maybe have an exceptionalism problem?
Well, yeah. Well, I think the culture thing was a lot of that, but I don't look at it as an exceptionalism problem. As much as it kind of turned into insecurity. Exceptionalism implies arrogance, and I think obviously there's some of that, and I think and it's earned, right? It's earned. I mean,
sure.
They missed the playoffs for the 5th time since Riley got here in 1995. Like it's earned, but I think it was insecurity. Like even with Pat saying, I didn't want to miss out on all of them, like his whole thing about the James Johnson and Dion things, like I didn't want to lose out on these players and not have a team. Like I have said this before, and I'll stick to this, and there's really nothing anybody in the organization can convince me otherwise on this, because I sort of know how a lot of these negotiations have played out. Like I think that he was personally stung by what happened with LeBron. I mean, I can speak to that. I did a long piece, long interview in his office about it.
And even what happened with Dwayne.
Right. Well, happened with Dwayne, but it started with LeBron. So it starts with LeBron. Like why would LeBron leave here? Like that was their whole attitude. That was his whole attitude. Why would he leave? We've given him the culture. We've given him, we've not given him the championships. We've provided a platform for him to convert his greatness into championships, right? Which I think they did. Like it was ultimately LeBron, okay, but they created conditions that allowed him to do something he hadn't done in 7 years in Cleveland. And he would have done it 3 times here probably if he hadn't frozen up in the 2011 finals. Now, LeBron likes to conveniently say now, he said it again in Brooklyn, at Dwayne's event, like, well, if we hadn't lost in 2011, then 2012 and 2013 don't happen. I don't believe that. Like, I know he believes that, like 2000 or, my failure in 2011 made me into what I was, made our team. But I think that team would have figured it out eventually. If they won in 2011, they would have won in 2012. Anyway, It is what it is. But I think, my conversation with Pat that day after LeBron left, I went in there with the intention. I even told the, PR guy Tim Donovan, like, I'll stay away from the LeBron stuff. Like, that was my intention. I came in with like a list. I had like a little booklet of questions I wanted to ask Pat. Like it was and I was going to stay away from LeBron, and he brought it up. Okay. I have the whole interview still on tape. He brought it up, and he was very clear about how hurt he was. And this was a generational team, and we broke the link in the chain, and all of that stuff was terrific stuff. It was a very thoughtful interview, as all interviews with him are, and so it was he was stung by that. And then after that, the Dwayne thing, okay, and people forget now what happened in the summer of 2015. It wasn't like everybody just remembers him leaving in 16, but 15 was a near crisis. Like, I wrote a ton of columns about that. Like, Dwayne wasn't happy. They didn't want to pay him. They didn't want to give him long-term money. Pat and Henry, rest in peace, were not communicating all that well. Dwayne wasn't happy at all. And, basically that was a meeting that the Arisons had with Dwayne directly that got the 1 year, $20 million deal. It was like, let's just roll it over. We'll deal with this next year. Okay. $20 million. You cool? We're cool. Okay, let's go. And then 2016, which, as we know, was a catastrophe. I mean, just a public relations nightmare. Think of all the things that Pat said about Dwayne at that press conference and has said for the past few months, right? In various interviews. Like, I've drafted one all of the time player. This is the guy who did it right. This is the example he set for our young players. You let that guy walk in 2016
and
over a couple $1 million
and felt disrespected on the way out. And that's the thing that hurts the most.
Right. And so you have those things. Then you have the one situation I have not blamed them for ever, because I think they did the right thing. But Chris Bosh, one of the most popular players in the organization, not happy on the way out. Okay. at all. I mean, that was contentious for months, and it was getting worse and worse. And I remember another one, Pat had a little sit down with some of the beat guys, like 5 of us, in his office to talk about the Chris Bosh situation. Right on media day, okay, or maybe it was the day. Yeah, it was media day. Actually, it was supposed to be a day earlier, but then Jose Fernandez died, and so they moved it. And Pat did it that morning, and I still have that tape. I listened to it the other day because I was just curious. I was refreshing my memory, and it was like, there was a lot of frustration there. So you had the core guys from that team that Pat loved, that he thought was going to be a 10-year team, maybe not win 10 titles, but was going to be a San Antonio-like team, right? Like in it every single year. And those guys all left unhappy with the organization, not buying into sort of the I don't call it the myth of Riley, because I think a lot of it is real, but sort of the aura of Riley, okay? Not buying into it, okay? Sharing that with other players around the league, which I know was happening. And then additionally, all of the supporting players on that team, having, issues on the way out the door. Rio was pissed, okay? Shane was unhappy his last year. James Jones was unhappy with playing time. Miller got amnesty. Chris Anderson was waiting around to get dumped for tax reasons. Like none of them were happy on the way out the door. Okay, I mean Norris got sent off. I mean the whole damn team. Ray Allen was pissed the whole 4th season of the Big Three. Trust me. Okay, I heard about it every day. All right, so you had all of that, and so I think he was personally stung. No, it's okay. So 3, and we'll wrap soon because there's a couple of rapid fire things I want to get to for Game of Thrones. So anyway, 3, 2, 1. So I think he was personally stung, and so I think there was some insecurity that enters in. You don't get Durant, you don't get Hayward. You've got a bunch of guys who are saying culture all the time. Let's wrap them up. Let's keep them. They buy in, and I think to a large degree, Chris, I think that's what happened. Maybe not for everybody in the front office, but I think motivationally what sort of led them to that place. So, but he doesn't want to quit, man. And I'm not advising that he should quit. I don't think he should be retired early. I think he should fight this till his last day on the job because, look, if anybody's going to get them out of this mess, it's probably him. Okay. Yeah. So and he deserves the right to do it, but I have used the hashtag one last chance. One last dance, as Pat said, is over. And now it's one last chance. He's got one last chance to figure this out. It may not be one last offseason, but it's a 2 offseason deal here where they need to figure it out and get this on the right track. And so he can leave this organization in the place it should be. All right, so we're going to end it there. We'll probably hit more of this later in the week. There's some other issues we want to get into. We're supposed to talk to Mark Stein, too, from the New York Times, which should be a lot of fun. Obviously, check out 5reasonsports.com. We've got all the details on the Riley presser, but also some of our guys from Miami Heat Beat will be writing columns about it. They have their own thoughts. The thing about Riley pressers is they give you material for the next 3 months. So if Pat wants to do another one in a week, we would certainly take that. But obviously check out all the other podcasts in our network. And I think when we hit this stuff later in the week, we'll get through some of the specific things about other players that Pat said and kind of see where this will go. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the 5 Reasons Podcast. Thank you so much.